Hi there, hope you're all well, and a very warm welcome back to At the Movies with Andrew, where I, Andrew, talk about what I saw when I was at the movies. You see, this title has layers. It's now March 2019. Spring is supposedly here, and certainly we are now knee deep into that awkward period between the Oscar contender season and the summer blockbuster season isn't for another month or two. So let's see what's crawled into the cracks in the meantime. I'll try and rattle off my thoughts in a hopefully coherent, hopefully intelligent, and hopefully entertaining manner. So if we're all ready, let's get started. Right, for my first movie, a slight hangover from last month's releases, but now we have The Kid Who Would Be King, directed by Joe Cornish. Yes, he formerly of the Adam and Joe show on Channel 4. 8 years after Attack the Block, which we've covered on this channel before, and with the furore over the Ant-Man scripting kerfuffle and the rumours of him doing the third Star Trek reboot movie, we finally got around to getting a second feature film from this director, and it's another kids in inner city London have fantastical things happen to them. This time young 12-year-old Alex, here played by Louis Serkis, son of Andy, is growing up with an absent father, a single loving mother, his best friend Bedders, and both of them are tormented at school by two bullies, Kay and Lance. Alex has grown up, the only remaining symbol of his father being a signed copy of the Legends of King Arthur, which he idolizes. All about King Arthur and Merlin, the Knights of the Round Table, and how they defeated Morgana the witch, and how she proclaimed that one day she will return when Britain is leaderless and divided. And sure enough, in modern day Britain, I don't know if it was fully in his mind or intentional, Joe Cornish, to release this around this time, but certain social, political events that are happening right here, right now. Brexit! The timing, the release of this movie could not be any more spot on, could it? Anyway, Alex one day is running away from his aforementioned tormentors and makes it to a abandoned building site where he discovers a sword, a lump of metal, which turns out to be a sword embedded in stone, and instinctively pulls it out. You can sort of see where this is going, can't you? But not long after that, the lanky, spotty weirdo who has recently started working in the chicken takeaway shop joins the school and proclaims in class, "You, Alex, pulled the sword from the stone. I am Merlin reincarnated. You must take up your destiny and train to stop Morgana, who will be coming back in 3 days' time, and I will train you." And so begins a quest whereby he, along with Bedders and even the bullies, Lance and Kay, they embark on a quest to stop Morgana from destroying and conquering Britain, especially once Alex starts questioning his mum about the book that he grew up with, and his mum evasively says, "Look, your dad had personal demons to face. He had his own battles to fight, okay?" And Alex, in his 12-year-old mind, thinks, that must mean my father was a hero, and I must find him, and he will help me. He will train me right. Yeah, so from there, this film essentially, there is, I have to say, for a children's movie these days, what with your bodily references and crude jokes and postmodern cultural references, this does, in comparison, does not have a single cynical, snarky bone in its body. It's there to be a straightforward, light-hearted, and moralistic, and surprisingly old-fashioned children's adventure. Yes, there are one or two references when Alex and Bedders are talking about this is like Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker, but what does this say on the sword? Put it into Google Translate. It's Latin, and fair enough. To be completely fair, that would be in a child's mind. Really, you can't really escape that. And particularly, what made me of note is there is a reference to Mario Kart, somebody driving. Where did you learn to drive? Mario Kart, which would be funny if Ready Player One hadn't already done that joke a year previously, but never mind timing and all that. As a child of the 80s and 90s, I can say that there have been the odd slew of King Arthur, Merlin, Sword in the Stone children's serials and movies that I can recollect. A kid in King Arthur's Court, Arthur's Quest, Merlin the Return, that Rick Mail Merlin movie that it's probably best not to speak of. So it's kind of reminiscent of that sort of thing growing up personally. So that was quite a nice surprise to have something this charming, this old-fashioned. However, I do stress old-fashioned here because compared to its contemporaries, it's perhaps not as pacey and fast. It's wants to take its time telling its story of a boy sticking to the code of chivalry of being a true knight and being courageous and brave and kind and honest, and that does lead to some it taking its time, this movie, of a very tepid pacing and bland, vaguely formed archetypes for our main characters. You've got the excitable best friend who looks like a sad puppy when he's hurt, and the bullies who turn out to be, they're not evil, they're just misunderstood, they just needed friends, that kind of thing. That's kind of what they amount to in terms of characterization. And the middle of the movie does feel like a long trawl across the Cornish countryside as a result. It's only with the third act climax where the rest of the school children are recruited because Morgana is coming after them, and they only join in when the headmistress says this is instead of lessons today. Yay, okay, we need to form a barricade with the teachers' cars in the car park. We need to set up traps with the gym equipment and the classroom doors, and we need to use school notice boards and stop traffic signs as shields. It was only at that point that I personally went, there's the spark, there's the vitality, the juxtaposition, the originality. There's Joe Cornish, there's the director that gave us Attack the Block. It took over 3/3 of the movie, nearly 2 hours to get there, but you finally made it near the end of the movie. That being said, the special effects are decent here. The undead armies, skeleton armies of Morgana aren't exactly Lord of the Rings, but it's a credible attempt with the budget they have, and the actors, particularly the child actors, carried this script and dialogue with conviction and sincerity, particularly Louis Serkis as Alex, and that does make a real difference there. With regards to the actors, Patrick Stewart turns up as old Merlin, and he's good old Captain Picard is really just there to be wise old man for about 5 minutes. Rebecca Ferguson is Morgana, and her character is mostly stuck to the inside of a tree in the Netherworld for most of the movie, just whispering through her tendrils and her roots, "Awaken my warriors. Britain will be mine. Their hearts are weak." Before coming out of her tree to turn into a CGI dragon near the end of the movie. I mean, no disrespect to Rebecca Ferguson, but anybody could have played this part. But Angus Emery, son of Cecilia, plays the young incarnation of Merlin here, and he was the real spark and vitality that carried a good chunk of this movie for me. He's there to be quirky and eccentric and odd and yet wise, and his he does magic spells through a combination of clicking fingers and moving his hands, like a lot of that in the movie. And the way I did that just now probably looked a bit awkward and dopey and stupid, but he convinces you. He carries it with dignity, well, something approaching dignity, and he could, give him a few years, he could be a good quirky Matt Smith-esque Doctor Who. In fact, there is a point in the middle of the movie where he has to leave for 10-15 minutes, like they've been through a battle with tree demons. It's like, oh, I'm weak, I have to go away and recharge my powers. This journey across the countryside is something you must face alone. I will see you later. And I was like, please don't go, Merlin, please, you're keeping this movie alive. Oh, never mind. Well, I do joke about that, but yeah, compared to other current kids' movies, this, by virtue of being straightforward and honest and true and old-fashioned and charming, is probably destined to get a bit lost in the flurry of its competition. But I feel that its heart is, with thanks to the actors and to some degree the direction, its heart is in the right place. And possibly, as an old fogey who wants to encourage a good a children's adventure with a good message at its heart, someone who wants to encourage that, I would say at least watch it. Do give it a chance. Right, for my next movie, here's something that might have slipped under most people's radars here. Border. I think on the last episode I said that Can You Ever Forgive Me was likely to be the last Oscar contender movie that I saw this year. Well, ignore what I said. This was nominated for Best Makeup and Hairstyling at the Oscars, so technically it counts. Swedish movie. If I say it's directed by Ali Abbasi, I would understand if that gave you a lot of blank looks, because he's Iranian Swedish and he's only done one film prior to this, Shelley, if anyone's heard of that. But if I say that the story was conceived by John Ajvid Lindqvist, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who gave us Let the Right One In, that film that got a American adaptation about a boy that was tortured and bullied at school and finds out that his strange little girl next door neighbor is a vampire. Yeah, you probably know that film, and you probably know the kind of odd fantasy, queasy, macabre fairy tale in a modern Swedish setting that we might be in for here. But to rattle off the premise, Ava Melander plays Tina, who lives in the rural Swedish woods with her well-meaning but slovenly and slobbish and useless boyfriend. And part of the title is that she's got a job at the customs, particularly at the border security patrol at a ferry port. So far, so mundane, but Tina, how do I put this in the politically correct sense? She does not fall in the standard definitions of beauty. Yeah, she's got lank hair, crooked, feral, yellowing teeth, and a pronounced brow, very Neanderthal looking, causing people to do double takes when they see her. And she's been told all her life, particularly from her father, who's now in a care home, that this is due to a chromosome deficit. But here's the thing, not only is she more, because of how people react to her, she's quiet and lonely, and she's lonely inside, you know, and she's more used to, has more of an affinity with the animals in the woods where she lives, but a very strange, affectionate affinity. And more so, she has this ability, unexplainable ability, to detect guilt or fear or shame by sniffing. So whenever people walk past the security gate, she starts sniffing, and even her upper lip curls like a dog. And then she goes, right, you're underage and you're carrying a bag of alcohol. Or, excuse me, sir, can I see your phone, please? And this memory card has child pornography on it. So it's because of that especially that causes her boss to go, how can you do this? And she says, I don't know, I just have always been able to smell guilt in people. Well, we've got there's this child pornography ring investigation was hitting a brick wall until you found that memory card. Now we want you to assist the police. So it is part macabre modern fairy tale, part police procedural, but a little more to the point. Around that time, somebody walks through the security gate. So this shifty looking drifter called Vor, played by Eero Milionov, again, hope pronunciation is good, and he looks similar to Tina. Same teeth, same hair, same forehead, and he's which catches Tina by surprise. And he's got this permanent sneer on him, this permanent superior smug look on him, like, I know more about you than you know about yourself. Oh, chromosome deficit, is that what they told you? And so slowly Tina becomes more fascinated by him, more curious about him, and more attracted towards him. And that is almost all I want to say about that plot and about the movie in general, because a good chunk of the initial enjoyment of this movie, I think, is in finding out the twists, seeing the twists unfold in this story for yourself. And even then, oh blimey, the way that these twists are revealed. Oh golly, you you have no idea. I could tell you what it is, I could explain it to you, and I feel that the manner in which these twists are shown would not prepare you. I was in an audience, a theatre of, well, I think, a broad range of young to middle-aged to older people, and when a certain scene came, there were gasps of horror, of shock, and afterwards nervous, coming out the theatre, nervous laughter, and people not sure if they enjoyed or were disgusted by what they had just seen, as a sheer revulsion and sheer fascination of, oh my god. So I won't spoil it here, but I think after I give my ranking, for those of you who are curious, I'll say what the twist is. But in the meantime, Ava Mendler as Tina certainly is a key, as the central character, plays a key role in depicting herself, character, as the outsider. Her initial quiet loneliness with her lifestyle, and a sense of shame and isolation, which is followed, once the revelation happens, by primal rage and anger and elation and joy at discovering her true identity. So it's certainly, she carried that well. Also, the direction, the cinematography is initially naturalistic and straightforward, which allows Tina to initially blend into her background of both the earthly outdoors and the every mundane background of her workplace. There's definitely an unnerving, quiet atmosphere to the majority of this movie, which is helped by the minimal, foreboding soundtrack. And like I said, cinematography and when close-ups of her nose, of her sniffing of her intense face, it does come as a jolt to that, which really worked for me. If I have any real nitpicks at all, I'd say that the third act, when a character's connection to the child pornography ring is made apparent and the two strands come together, the way it's presented, it could be seen as a queasy, close to real life gear change for what has previously been reveling in its fantastical fairy tale nature. But fortunately, I would say, fortunately, it remains a backdrop to Tina's arc of a constant struggle, character arc of nature versus nurture. So I can understand it's quite visceral, quite grotesque, quite venal. I can understand, and certainly seeing the reactions of my fellow audience members, this might not be everybody's cup of tea, but this was arguably, off the top of my head, my first, as a movie I just knew the vague premise for going into it. The way it was presented and acted, and it was my first pleasant surprise in movies this year, although I don't even think pleasant is the right word to describe it. It was definitely my cup of tea, and for my 2 cents, I would say that this is a well executed piece of fairy tale horror that is worth a buy it. Now, do you want to know the twist? Are you sure you want to know the twist? Okay, Tina and Vor are trolls. And I don't mean they send out nasty, malicious misinformation on the internet. I mean, they are actual mythical, the last creatures. They talk about how they're the last remnants of their species. And Vor says that there's a small community somewhere and how humans have ruined our world and all that. And we find out Tina gives into her impulses and has hot, steamy, noisy, grunting, animalistic sex with Vor in the woods, during which we physically see for ourselves that Vor has a vagina, and mid-coitus, a tiny micro troll penis comes out of Tina's clitoris, much to her horror and surprise. We also see Vor making loud, noisy, painful grunts in the middle of the woods at night, and we discover that he gives birth to premature troll babies every month because that's just what his species does. I did warn you. Right, next I would like to talk about Us. No, don't. There's no need to sit on that psychiatrist chair. I mean the movie Us. Okay? Alright. The latest movie from Jordan Peele, his second film, the first of which, Get Out, we've covered before on Matt's Movies, Music and More. In 1986, a young girl called Adelaide is out with her mother and father at the Fanfare in Santa Cruz. Mother wants to go to find a toilet, so she says to her daddy, look after Adelaide, and daddy is too distracted by the whack-a-mole game to go, yeah, fine, I'll keep an eye on her. Of course he doesn't, and Adelaide wanders into a hall of mirrors in the corner of the Fanfare, and encounters something or someone that leaves a profound impact on her. Cut forward to when she's an adult, played by Lupita Nyong'o, and she seems to be a stable enough individual. She's got a loving husband, played by Winston Duke, and got friends, one of whom is played by Kate Moss. She's got a, a son and daughter, and they're going on holiday to Santa Cruz, which Adelaide seems very reticent about, you know, post-traumatic stress and all that. And um, Winston Duke goes, "Oh no, it'll be great. It'll be a great summer holiday. Never mind that the local old man has just been killed horribly and bloodily. It'll be great." And it seems that way until a mysterious group of four, a family, stand outside their house one night and soon break into their house and force a home invasion. So far, so funny games, but we then see that these four people, mother, father, boy, and girl, are doppelgangers. They are twisted, facially scarred, mostly mute, deranged killer doppelgangers. Who are they? Where did they come from? And more to the point, will anybody get out of this alive? So yeah, this wasn't intentional, but this was immediately following my previous film Border. This made a fascinating companion piece, or double bill almost, to Border, in the sense that, again, I don't want to go any further into the plot too much, because again the appeal is seeing these twists and unraveling this mystery for yourself. But much like Get Out, this is effectively a mainstream horror with with an underlying social commentary. But compared to Get Out, I think this was a conscious decision on the director's part, a reaction to how everybody confused the genre of Get Out. Is it a horror? Is it a comedy? He said, right, I'm going to do a straight up horror for my next movie so you don't get confused. So yeah, Get Out was more slow burn and lengthy dialogue and slowly unraveling its mystery towards the end of that film. Whereas I'd say that at a reasonably early stage, this film lays out its tone that these are huge, brutal, silent, unknowable slasher killers with red jumpsuits and huge stabby scissors that they carry around. They will hunt you down, they will not stop, and they will kill you. It's that kind of movie for certainly the middle of the movie, but still there are layers of visual, and in terms of visuals and dialogue, subtext and symbolism, like in Get Out. There's the Jeremiah biblical quote turns up a lot, and also in dialogue there's stuff like who are you people? We're Americans. Get it? Us, US, America, underclass. Yeah. Still, the cast, the main cast here, particularly Lupita Nyong'o in the lead, are great and well developed as both our regular family and the doppelgangers, particularly Lupita Nyong'o, who, as her murderous doppelganger, sounds like her throat has been burnt or clawed at. So that did leave a real effect on me, and I suspect many people. Once upon a time, there was a little girl and a shadow, and they were tethered. Yeah, that was great. Jordan Peele, with his comedy background, proves, much like in Get Out, that he can intercut humour and horror to great effect. There was a particular scene with Alexa that I won't spoil, but it did make me chuckle out loud. So yeah, there's a great atmosphere to this, but nitpicks. Towards the end of the movie, there are twists that, again, I won't spoil, but there's one twist about, we find out where these murderous doppelgangers actually come from and who are they. And it's a throwaway line of about 5 seconds of dialogue, and more than that, the actual explanation does make the sort of logical structure fall down when you start thinking about this. Like, no, how could this have remained a secret all these years, and how could they have functioned and survived? You're telling me they survived that way? No, that wouldn't work, surely. And so that does kind of eat away at you. But also, there's a final frame twist. Let's leave it like that. That did feel a bit M. Night Shyamalan, and probably because I've watched too many movies, it was a twist about that character that I did see coming 10 miles away. But I can say that it is the kind of twist that means you can go back and watch this movie again from a new perspective of events, certainly. But what I want you to take away here is that between this and Get Out, and the fact that he's producing and helming the Twilight Zone reboot that should be coming out any day now, people are comparing Jordan Peele, this former comedian, that, oh wow, he's the new Stephen King or the new Rod Serling. In the long term, based on the story twists here, I would exercise some caution that maybe he is the new Rod Serling, or he could very easily be the new M. Night Shyamalan. There, I said it. Let that sink in, and please keep that in mind. But for the time being, I'll say that yes, it's at its heart, it's a stabby slasher horror movie. But when it's this well made and directed and acted, stuff like that makes all the difference in the world to this genre. It's a well-made piece of mainstream horror, with repeat viewing potential, and on that regard, I'd say that you should definitely buy it. And finally, YouTube review of Captain Marvel. Yeah, this won't be contentious in the slightest, will it? Captain Marvel, for those of you who are just joining us, is the latest Marvel Comics superhero movie. The 21st, I believe. That's how far we are into this whole cycle. Directed by Marvel first-timers Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. We follow Brie Larson as this Kree space soldier called, known to everyone as Vers. She's a little bit reckless, a little bit cocky, a little bit impertinent and impulsive, but she's part of the Kree police force fighting their war with their mortal enemies, the alien Skrulls. And it's during an altercation with these villains that Vers is separated from her group, including Jude Law, and crashes into this strange planet that she doesn't remember. Earth in 1995. I say doesn't remember, but even before this, she was getting strange dreams of a past that she doesn't recognize, and her Kree office superiors are always telling her to suppress it. It's not good for you, these strange dreams. But now that she's on Earth, these visions are becoming more prominent about her she had a past on this Earth, and people calling her Carol Danvers. Ha 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 ha. So she teams up with local guy Nick Fury, a guy you may have heard of, and as visions become more prominent and she finds out more about her past, she becomes more uncertain of who to trust and what to believe, especially given that the Skrulls are shapeshifters and they're on Earth. So yeah, Marvel superhero action movie, and the 21st to boot. What could I really say here that hasn't already been said? You know, that movie was good, that movie was good. I can say that the action is, again, it's well choreographed, and it's typical postmodern humour that you come to expect from these movies. One or two that I do admit, did elicit a laugh out of me, but I will point out at one point a villain gives a melodramatic speech about, yes, this is the moment I will have my revenge. This is the time of reckoning, complete with rousing orchestral music. And then Captain Marvel just punches him and ends the speech. I mean, like we didn't have this in the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I saw this coming by this point. I mean, I get it. Loki ranting and then being beaten up by the Hulk in the first Avengers movie was hilarious, but that was 2012, people. Can't we come up with something else? Speaking of which, not only is this kind of familiar, it's almost a little bit backwards, because what I've just told you, yeah, at its heart, it's a very typical amnesia, self-discovery origin story for a superhero, which makes it does feel at times like in Marvel terms, a Phase 1 movie in a world where we're about to wrap up Phase 3. Again, the action is good. The space stuff at the beginning with Vers and her Kree soldier friends, and the third act, which I won't spoil, but it involves space again. It involves a revelation. It involves fisticuffs and explosions and special effects and what have you. That was dynamic, but the middle of it felt like a very bog standard, well, with Nick Fury, we've got a buddy cop scenario here, but it felt like we're going through the motions here. In fact, not even joking, the most thrilling part for me in the middle of this movie, when I felt on the edge of my seat, was when somebody at the back of my theatre shouted out, "For God's sake, will you turn off that phone?" Yeah. This is a movie that's what distinguishes Captain Marvel in the Marvel universe is that it's because of 1995, it's heavily reliant on 90s references for most of its laughs and frills. But as a child of the 90s, I appreciated that. I appreciated putting the disk drive into the computer and then the slow wait, because it's still loading. Yeah, yes, kids, that's what computers were like back in 1995. My science computer skills class at school can certainly attest to that. And I will also say that the soundtrack, with tracks like "I'm Just a Girl" and "Don't Make Me Over," did put a smile on my face, sure. In terms of the actors, briefly, Ben Mendelsohn is doing his Ben Mendelsohn villain thing, which is fair enough, although I will say, when he turns into the Skrull alien, he's got a New Zealand. Does the planet Skrull, or whatever it's called, have a New Zealand? Because that's what you sound like. But Brie Larson is charismatic and engaging enough. She is doing the, I don't know if this was an instruction or a template she's supposed to follow, but she's doing the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man thing at the beginning of being snarky and quippy, which is funny enough. And but maybe it's the space soldier character, but wandering around on Earth in the middle, she came across as a bit stoic, but yeah, like I said, she's engaging enough, and especially when playing off good old Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. Speaking of which, we do get an explanation for the eye patch, and oh dear. Last year I saw a movie in which a character said, "Oh, you don't play well with others, do you? You like to work alone. Well, let's fill out this form. Let's call you Han Solo." And later in that movie, "Here, Han Solo, you can borrow my blaster and give it back to me later." It's that kind of retconning or explanation where you feel like the unexplained myth was better? Because the explanation for Nick Fury's eye patch is like, really? We're going with that? We couldn't go with anything dramatic or serious or worthy. It's a joke. I won't spoil it, but you'll probably groan like I did. Um, in the placement of Marvel cinematic movies, it's this. I wouldn't call as the latest Marvel cinematic superhero movie. It's fine. It's serviceable. I would not call this the worst. I think that honour still belongs to 4-2, The Dark World, but I can see where this really falls in the placement of things. I don't think it really holds any clues to Endgame or anything. The scrolls were interesting once we got to get a proper look at them and their culture and their behaviour and their motivation. And if they do an adaptation of the Secret Invasion Marvel storyline for Phase 4, like I suspect they might, then and if we return to the Skrulls as a consequence, then based on this movie, I would be interested. Definitely, this was a good foundation in that potential regard. Um, as Marvel movies go, it's not a light and fluffy throwaway comedy like Ant-Man and the Wasp was. I feel that this was very deliberately right. This is the last bit of fun that you get to have before we get into the meaty finale of Avengers Endgame. So Captain Marvel, to put it bluntly, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either. It's a Marvel action comedy movie. It's there. It'll keep you occupied for 2 hours. Just watch it. If you really wanted to know who Nick Fury was beeping at the end of Avengers Infinity War, well, here's your answer. I hope you're satisfied. Right, that's March for you. Again, Captain Marvel, latest Marvel superhero movie, crushes the box office. But I hope with this episode and with my episodes in general, I hope to at least very slightly highlight that there are other movies out there that, in my opinion, are worth your time. Looking into April, we certainly see some big names coming up like Dumbo. Avengers Endgame and Dumbo, ominously, and as well as a couple of other superhero movies that I will be keeping on my radar in the near future, and I hope to join you there and then. In the meantime, did you see any of these movies? What did you think about them? Please comment if you have any opinions about that or what you thought of my opinions. In the meantime, I hope you continue to keep an eye on Matt's Movies, Music and More. Please like, please comment, please subscribe, and I hope to see you again in April. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and peace out.